I'm here today with Nancy Gale. And Nancy, welcome to today's show.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much.
So, Nancy, for the listeners, can you tell us your background? Let's start with your childhood and then bring us up to the current.
Oh, goodness. So I was actually in LA till I was about 6 years old, and then we moved to Michigan. So I spent my formative years in Michigan uh, during times of economic prosperity, during the auto boom, and ultimately, sort of circuitously, found my way back to LA. And that's where I reside and started my company and my nonprofit.
Starting a company, it must have been a process. Did you immediately show up in LA and says, I want to do this? Did you have dreams and aspirations when you were little to be your own entrepreneur? Or how did this come about?
I would say, beyond dreams of having my own company, I didn't know I would ever do anything any differently. I always knew I'd be running my own show. And I always knew it would be something that if I put into words before I did it, people would say, are you crazy? You can't do that. That's impossible. And I was right. That's what has happened really the entire, for my entire journey. So, but I actually veered off my path for a while. I was very, very creative my whole life, loved fashion my whole life. And then one day, for so many reasons now looking back that are so obvious, I decided I would be a technical writer, which is absolutely, there's nothing about me that resonates with. But I was good at it. And I felt that it would give me, that it would make people take me seriously because I laugh a lot. I smile all the time. I was really creative, really interested in fashion. And I started noticing that every time I would have a conversation with anybody, when we got to about the 2-minute mark, people would say, wow, you're so intelligent. You're so articulate. And so what it told me was the world didn't see me that way. So to make the world see me that way, I would do something very serious, and I became a technical writer, and I worked with Transamerica and Bank of America and Ernst & Young, and that would make me a person that people would take seriously. And I realized one day through a really interesting conversation with my folks that that's not who I was, and that I'm not living out my dreams. I'm not living my passion. And for someone who is such a passionate person, I think what I did was I found ways to get around that. I became a really serious skydiver. And I built, sort of components in my life that I felt really impassioned about, not realizing I was doing that to fill this void. And so one day, actually, I was on the phone with my folks, and they were in Michigan. And I said, the technical writing, I'm bored to tears. I can't do this anymore. And they said, well, you're a creative. You've always been a creative. And then 2 days later, FedEx comes to my door and with a box, and I open the box, and this is in the early 90s.
Mm-hmm.
And I open the box, and there's a PowerBook 3400, the first, right? I think it was one of the very first Mac or Apple portable computers. And I open it up, and there's a sticky note, and it says, you're a creative. Now start acting like one. Love, Mom and Dad. And the light just went on. They said, we don't care what it is you're doing, but we wanted to get you the most creative thing to help you take a step forward. And the funniest part about that, though, was the idea of my mom and dad at the computer store trying to get their daughter a laptop. So that was really the end of my technical writing career. And I knew somebody who did gifting in the entertainment industry. And I worked with her, and that eventually turned into starting JAMAH.
Now, I have to say, when I heard the creative side, fashion design, and then becoming the technical writer, I've done a lot of interviews, and what immediately came to mind is how brilliant you are, because some people their IQs are so high. Yeah, they can do anything they want. To have a passion in being creative and fashion design, say, oh, I think I'll just be a technical writer for a little bit. And so my hat's off to you. So you're one of the few individuals that, Nancy, you can do anything you want. And so it took you a little while, but you chose, okay, let me go move back towards my passion. So I want to move back into the JAMAH. Let me get the right pronunciations.
JAMAH.
Okay,
Yes,
it is JAMAH.
JAMAH.
So all right. So now you have this company, this concept. All right. It's never easy starting. It's never easy getting your first client.
Right.
Walk me through the process.
So it's funny that we're talking about this, because we just tore out of the gate. Because I had been working with this gal, and we were working with a lot of entertainment clients. We were already for another company doing their high-end gifting. So we came in and said, well, what if we come in and take that over and take it to a whole nother level? We start doing women's pieces, and we do custom fitting, and we also do very hidden logos, because typically our client would be studios or producers wanting to buy gifts for their movies for their talent and their crew. So we said, well, if you want them to continue wearing these gifts, if they're really gifts to thank them, then maybe we don't want the logo splattered all over. We want to do something more subtle, more fashion forward. And so we opened our doors on January 20th at 9 a.m. And by 9:20 had our first order for 1,400 fleeces, actually for a Ron Howard movie. So there's an up and a downside to this. We had order after order, and at every show from, at the time, like the Rosie O'Donnell show was huge. We did those gifts. We did Will and Grace. Every show that came on, we worked with NBC and with Paramount. And people would say, gosh, you're so successful. You really got this. The truth is, we were right place, right time. And producers at the time loved to buy these elaborate gifts. So the downside of that is you're never scrappy, which now running my business, I realize is the most important component. Because the answer to everything is, well, we can pay a lawyer, we can pay a bookkeeper, we can pay a CPA, we can pay everybody we need, we can pay. And then the market changed. And suddenly reality TV took over the airwaves. And they wanted down and dirty budgets, and they weren't buying gifts like this. And I realized this is not actually my passion again. But I kept spending time in factories, because the difference between us and a lot of the gifting companies were typically they'd find a gift in a catalog overseas, and they'd just order 200 sweatshirts. And we started doing a lot in leather, a lot of leather bags. So the more and I wanted to produce everything at the time in Canada, as I got my feet wet in this business. And eventually I realized, gosh, every time I'm in the leather factory, I love this. And because we worked with a lot of celebrity, I felt like I have a lot of ties to this, to see how people respond to what I do. And so I became fascinated with designing bags, because I thought, this is so interesting. A bag, right? It's totally utilitarian. Everybody needs to put stuff in something. But if you can actually take that bag and make it a really personalized, almost work of art, that really changes the look of your outfit. If you can either take a bag and throw it over your shoulder, or you can take a bag that's really beautiful, and suddenly you don't just throw it over your shoulder, you rise up to it. And yet, so it's a fashion item, it's utilitarian, and that really resonated with me. So I became really interested in making bags. And at that part, my business partner and I realized it was time to separate. She was, her strength was definitely in the gifting arena. That became absolutely of no interest to me. And because the business had changed so much, it wasn't bringing in the return that we were looking for. So then the market changed, and of course 2008 came, and I watched all these handbag designers go out of business. And I would say at the time I was mainstream luxury. The bags were $600-700. They were kind of innocuous at the time to Coach and Kate Spade and that level. And what I realized when the market changed was I can either go down to the $20 bag and produce that in China, or what's the other option? And being a Detroit girl who grew up in economic prosperity and saw the great designers and the great craftsmanship of the United States, I thought, that resonates with me. And then I started to realize, wow, there's really a gap in the market. There's not a true American luxury design house. And that's not to say that people don't design here, but you never hear that.
Yeah.
And I started thinking, this is so fascinating. If you do what I do in Europe, you hear the most gorgeous vocabulary, craftsmanship, couture, atelier. And if you do the exact same thing here, you hear manufacturing, production, and factory. Absolutely not sexy, not beautiful, not inviting, but we do the same thing. And a gentleman on a sewing machine here who's been sitting in that seat for 35 years, he deserves the words craftsmanship, couture, atelier. And so I thought, that's the gap, right? That's the space that's not being filled. Someone's going to do it. May as well be me. I've been around now for 20 years. And then the great thing is Tesla became popular. So suddenly there's an association, right, between American design and beauty. So that became the course I wanted to chart. And it is challenging, devastating at times. People think, the response I get and especially received when I began was, you're crazy. There'll never be another design house in general. Certainly not an American design house, and certainly not from an unknown. But I kept thinking, well, at one time Coco Chanel was unknown. She was she was on her knees sewing, hemming skirts. And although we don't realize it now, it was 25 years before anybody knew who she was. And why not? Of course there are going to be new companies and new houses. And then the real irony is that all the European design houses, which I grew up coveting, they all produce in China now.
I'm visiting here today with Nancy Gale. She is the founder of JAMAH. And when we come back, I want to talk about the significance of the name of your company and how this came about. We'll be right back after these messages.
Grandpa, can we do chemistry? Papa, Daddy. Grandpa, let's do something fun.
We'll help you stay organized so you can focus on what really matters in life. Give us a call today and see how we can help you start saving taxes. Welcome back. I'm visiting here today with Nancy Gale. She's the founder and CEO of JAMAH. And Nancy, when individuals set out to do a company, often when the biggest stumbling blocks is, what do I want to call it? What's the name? You have a very unique name in JAMAH, JAMAH. Okay, tell me the story.
So interestingly, when I was heading in this direction, I thought, luxury American design house. Now, I had named it earlier, but always had big visions. And the truth be known, right, if my last name was Balenciaga, perhaps I would have used that. And Nancy Gale is a great mainstream media name, and it's really been, I feel like it's perfect for my nonprofit. But for the handbag brand, I wanted something different. I wanted something that made people ask what it meant. And I wanted something that eventually we would build to where I can then put Nancy Gale for JAMAH on that. Because I didn't want to use the Nancy Gale name until I really felt ready to be in that league. And the goal, which is coming up in a year and a half, is that Nancy Gale for JAMAH will have really earned its way, because I want to produce that line in January of 2020 on our 20th anniversary. So, but finding the name JAMAH, I was just reading and everything I could get my hands on. In fact, my ex-boyfriend and I went on a little ski trip, and he picked up one of the bags and he said, "This is so heavy. What's in here?" And I said, "Oh, it's books," because I'm looking for the name for my company. But I was looking through Origin of Words, and I kept coming upon it, and I was so drawn to it. And I thought, that just sounds so pretty. And I could see the J also sort of becoming this insignia. So once I chose it, I discovered so many different meanings for it. So in Africa, there's a park called JAMAH Park, and it represents freedom. And in Arabic, it means together. And I've since discovered that in Buddhism and Swahili, it's a sound that represents to be. And our motto is be who you are. And the root, so pijama, comes from pi is rooted in Persian for night, and jama in Hindi for clothing, for comfort clothing. And the most important sort of what jama is rooted on is that you really can find that luxurious space only when you are truly comfortable. So there it is.
Yeah, so it sounds like it had a root back to Persia.
Hindi.
Hindi.
Because so pajama is pi from Persian,
Okay.
but jama is rooted in Hindi for clothing. So
Okay.
night clothing.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, and it's a very catchy name too. It's so when the name is put in place, you already had a vision of the designer bags by Nancy Gale, pajama by Nancy Gale. Moving forward, though, being in a specialty handbag, these are not something that you're mass producing. They're usually individuals. So tell me about your first customer, how that came about.
So my first customer, I was actually working a show, and someone at the time, I was at actually at an Academy Awards backstage show.
Yeah.
And someone put me in touch with the Desperate Housewives, which was huge at the time. And he brought them my bags, and they all wanted them. And I thought, wow, this won't do anything for the brand, but it did so much for my confidence to realize these gals right now can have anything, and they want JAMAH. So my first customer, it was really more for me, less our first customer, because we went to a trade show and everybody, all the stores come in. But my first sort of big, wow, this could really, this sets up our path is, I went to do a gig sort of in between the gifting and the customized pieces for Clint Eastwood. I went to Warner Brothers, and he and his wife at the time were doing Christmas gifts. And so someone called us in, and we would work with his assistant. But one of the gentlemen said, when you come, bring your other bag. Let the girls want to see a showing of your handbags. So I said, okay. So I bring the bags, and someone comes around and says, this gal Holly needs to see them to take them to Angie. I don't know who any of these people are. And so this gal Holly comes back, and she takes the bags, and she said, I'm going to go show them now to Ms. Jolie if you can hang on. Oh, Angelina. So they come back, and she said she'd like to buy 9 bags, and she picks up the 9. She said, however, she recognized one that Brad already has. So Brad had one from a movie. And then he wore it so much that we got a call that Channing Tatum wanted the bag that Brad Pitt had. And so that was the sort of segue for us, where people connected us with something that mattered. Because again, these are people that can wear bags they can wear any label that they'd like. And suddenly they're being seen in JAMAH. So that kind of put us on the map.
What is your distribution model like today? If someone wants to get one of your bags, how do they go about finding it?
So our website, which is JAMAH.com.
Okay.
So we keep very small inventory, because we've discovered certain combinations of certain styles have become really popular. But everything we do is basically made to order. And our turn is quick because we're made in the USA. And the great thing is, like, you might order the same bag as somebody else, but yours is being made for you. So on our website, you can select your leather color, your hardware finish. We also do personal inscriptions. So you could write a love letter to your wife, and we would emboss that in leather and sew that inside, so that one day, right, your granddaughter might have this bag. And now there's really a story behind it. So basically, our orders come in, again, working locally. We produce as we're just on demand, aside from, again, this small inventory that we keep. But we are scaled for volume. So we can also do very, very reasonable turns on very large orders.
And you have a variety of leather
Yes.
products that you use.
Yes.
I noticed that you brought a bag today. It has some ostrich and some alligator.
A crocodile. Yeah.
Crocodile.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So we do mostly Italian lambskin.
Okay.
And primarily Italian lambskin. And then we do exotics from wherever they're most popular. We do all byproduct, though. So we don't do any kill for product.
Okay. And so getting the leather in, do you notice that with the demand of what's happening in the world today, it's a little tougher? Or
Do you know, to be honest with you, I work with a really amazing leather company in LA that handles all of that. And they've been doing this for so long. And I have a great personal relationship with them. So I feel like it's firsthand. I've actually visited the tannery in Florence. But we're not experiencing any shift now in demand.
That's interesting.
And supply.
And even in the day and age when a lot of the designers have moved over to China, and the designer handbags have become more popular, it looks like you found a good niche.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's funny because when I started this, no one cared about Made in the USA. Then people acted like they cared about Made in the USA, and now they actually do.
So, start to finish, how long does it take to get a handbag after the order?
We tell people for our lambskin bags 2 to 6 weeks. Again, unless you order one of our very few stocked inventory. And then for exotics, it could be 3 months by the time we go through the whole process. And I've done custom pieces as well, which could be 2 to 4 months.
And then you have a wide range of colors.
Yes.
And so right now the company are you set to expand?
Yes.
Beyond the U.S. borders, or are you currently there?
We are
Okay.
as far as orders. We get
Yeah.
a lot of international orders.
Nancy, a bag is often representative to a person's identity. And I want to draw this in of how do you reach your clients, your customers, in terms of helping the women to establish an identity with the bag that they carry?
It's such an interesting question because, of course, the uphill and constant battle for me is my client, right, carries Chanel. They carry Hermes. They have the Birkin. And how do we bring them from that space to where we respect all of those brands and give them an understanding of who we are? And so I always want our customer to feel like they're really connected to the brand, that they're part of it. And so that's why you're able to select sort of some extra special pieces with our bags. You can, again, select your color. You can select your hardware finish. You can have it personalized. You can say, I need my strap longer or shorter. You can make special requests that so long as they fall within the vision of the brand, we will accommodate. So the process is, the biggest part of the process for us is how do we get the women that say, well, I will only feel properly represented if I'm wearing the big name brand. And we're getting there. We are really appealing to the people who love to be on the cusp, who say, I have all the designer big names, but what we're hearing a lot right now is the woman who says, I get to a street corner and every woman has the same brand or even the same style within that brand. But how do I get something different that isn't scary? Because often different means runway, and that doesn't work either. So we're sort of becoming known for being kind of that little engine that found a way to do different without scaring people. So, so the process is you make that selection at our factory, which is in LA, everything's hand cut. And we do a lot of hand stitching, of course, a lot of machine stitching with sewers that I always say, if you watched our sewers, it looks like someone who's just doing a beautiful dance. And I love that. In fact, when I was sort of cementing everything with my factory, I had seen right before this factory, I had seen another factory that I was interested in they do gorgeous work, and it was beautiful aesthetically. You felt like you were walking into this show place. And I kept thinking, I need to connect with the sewers. And they didn't allow me to see the sewers. You can't go to the back room. So then I moved on to, someone recommended the next place that I went to see. And they invited me in, and I just watched the sewers who all had relationships with each other. There was so much love and laughter. The second lunch was over. They were right back to their work. But there was just beauty. And I realized that's what JAMAH is. The beauty's on the inside. It's not about these aesthetics. Granted, with the bags, the aesthetic on the outside is, that becomes, of course, super important. But it was really fascinating for me to feel like I want every part of my brand to bring a feeling. So when the customer has our bag, and that's why the personalized messages inside, if someone opts for that, is that every bit of experience you have with our bag becomes part of you. And I always say the bag, JAMAH is really for when you have arrived. And the right person, they know when that is.
It's interesting that as you go through the fashion, bag world and the creation, trying to stay unique. Now, I notice you brought a bag with today of crocodile and ostrich. Do a lot of your bags blend different leathers together?
Yes. In fact, the one thing that I do, and the gentleman I work with who I get my exotics through, he always says, we love that you mix exotics. Nobody mixes exotics. So that's become like our little something.
What are some of the other leather or skin products that you use?
Oh my gosh. We do mostly alligator, crocodile, eel, and ostrich. I'm starting to work with some sanded stingray, which I'm getting very interested in. The problem with stingray is the hand is really rough. So we found a gorgeous stingray emboss. But for actual stingray, we're going to see how the sanded skin works. And then in about 3 months, we're going to announce another exotic that is actually PETA friendly, but I can't tell you anything about it.
Okay,
that.
so we'll keep that under the covers until coming up. But again, your site of JAMAH, JAMAH.
Yep. JAMAH.com.
Yeah. Will allow you to go through, choose different leather products or colors and
everything.
Okay.
And then you can also schedule an appointment to have a consultation. The site, we are in the process of a grand reopening.
Okay.
So the site will be back in full. Right now, there's a gorgeous slideshow.
Yeah.
We will be in full action by the 15th.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, and consultations, is that by phone or in person or?
Both.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
depending on location.
On the personalization process, how many people actually put personalized messages within the bags?
It's becoming more common. I'll just gives me the opportunity to tell the greatest story. I had a customer whose wife was going through this brutal chemo. And every time she'd have a treatment, he'd take a little yellow sticky and he'd write, "Annie, I love you to the moon and back, Randy." And he'd put that on her tray. And when she recovered and was starting to go out again and wanted to really take care of how she looked, and she wanted a JAMAH bag. So he bought her a JAMAH bag, and we embossed, "Annie, I love you to the moon and back, Randy," and sewed it inside the bag. And whenever I tell that story, the next person typically wants the personalization. Part of this whole reopening that we're doing, we're telling a lot more of that story. So I see it as something. And also, as people are understanding what our brand is about, we're getting many, many more inquiries. So I think right now it's probably 20%. I think that's going to shift to probably 60%.
I want to pivot for just a few minutes in this closing segment and talk about the nonprofit that you've set up, Ambition.
So Ambition, I always say, is my heartbeat. I realize having a brand of this level, of this caliber, that I wanted some balance, not just for me, but for my customers. And I didn't want to just find a cause and say, we'll donate part of the proceeds. I want something where when our customers are investing in our brand, they're investing in us helping sort of move the needle forward in an outward direction. So I always felt I grew up with sort of the ideal dinner table as far as mentorship and access and opportunity. And of course, as I was going through the world, I realized that's the only difference between my life and someone else's who didn't have that is access and exposure. So I realized I want to bring my dinner table to kids that don't have what I did. And for me, that was mentors and opportunity and entrepreneurship in the sense of learning solution-driven thinking. Because I thought that's something that no matter what one decides to do, whether they are an entrepreneur, whether they do or don't start a business, solution-driven thinking is sort of the baseline for everything. So I thought that's the perfect balance for my brand. Plus, I can expose these students, underprivileged students, because in a nutshell, what we are is an entrepreneurial program for underprivileged youth. So I can also expose my students to another world. If they choose that they're interested in that, we want them to know they have access. If they choose that that's not for them, they still need to know they have access. So I started Ambition February 22nd, 2010. We've worked with a very large number of amazing youth. And I feel like that's the sort of, it brings JAMAH full circle because it's me, my roots were made in the USA, and doing something really big, really ambitious with the brand. And then we started Ambition, and Ambition again brings me back to my roots, my table, having this access. And it's growing into some amazing, into many other components are coming out of Ambition. And one of them that I'm particularly proud of is called Celine's Ladder. And it's teen talk on major issues, teen talk by teens only. Adults are not allowed to speak unless spoken to. And our first topic for the first year, we're bringing kids together from great wealth to really all spectrums of socioeconomic, race, religion, and we bring teens together to talk about white privilege and racism as they see it. So we're in a really exciting place with Ambition, and it's just I always say I wanted my cause and commerce to be so intrinsically connected that one couldn't function without the other. Because if I don't put JAMAH on the line for Ambition, the Ambition kids will never, ever have what they really need, and vice versa. So,
how does a person find out more information on Ambition?
Ambition.org. Yes.
Easy enough.
Easy enough.
And then is it geared towards high school age
high
kids?
School, juniors and seniors in high school. That's my sweet spot.
Excellent.
I love teenagers, which is always fascinating to everybody.
Well, Nancy, it's been a pleasure having you here today on the show and for visiting about JAMAH and also this last segment, Ambition. But we're out of time. So we've been visiting here today with Nancy Gale. She is the founder and the CEO of JAMAH and also the nonprofit Ambition. And thanks for joining us here on American Dreams, and join us here next week right here on this station.